I'm doing
We
it
need
now.
another board.
All right. Okay, I'm recording now. So anyways, those individuals would be Bill Pertelli, who uh, I met at CollabNet, and he's still coaching us today. Tim Kelton from Descartes Labs. He's a co-founder of Descartes Labs, a brilliant mind, and one of the first people I started talking to about the challenges around uh, a Google a Kubernetes environment and organizing microservices in terms of versioning, and his mentor, Doug Orr. And if you are from Google, Doug Orr is a sort of an infamous name in Google. Doug was one of the senior engineering directors at Google around the Kubernetes project, so he knows Kubernetes probably better than anyone. And he has been on our technology oversight committee from the beginning, he and Tim. Then, of course, there's Phil Gibbs, who was one of the masterminds behind the domain structure. Michael Galloway, who's from Netflix, who's been really great at giving us some insights on what Netflix is going through. In fact, component sets was something we first heard from him. Hank Hendrickson, who is from BP, I found him in the same way I found many of you. He has some very interesting perspectives on managing microservices in a really large environment. And then Christopher Palmer, who is one of our end users, who has been super supportive of us over the last year and has really rooted for us and quite honestly understood the importance of versioning and the domain structure that Ortelius has. So I don't know if any of you are on here, but we love you and thank you so much for making this happen. We couldn't have done it without this level of a TOC board giving us the encouragement and making sure that we were on the right track and building a product that was important to everyone. Now, I am going to open up the floor to Phil Gibbs. I think Phil should just say hello because he has really hung on and has been around all this time. He has watched us. He's been hired by us. He's been terminated by us. But we still love him, and we've been, rooting for his code all this time.
And one thing, Phil, just you got to tell us how you figured out the concept of domains before anybody even started talking about it, like in the microservice world, and where did that idea really come from?
Well, hello. I mean, to be honest, the domain structure, although it fits really well with microservices, at the time we were developing what was Deployment Manager. The domains were there to split up in individual teams, right? So the idea was that you would get components that were shared across project teams. So, for example, Java runtimes and ODBC libraries and that kind of thing would be generated at a sort of global level. So it's a team structure. It's a global structure. And then individual teams could inherit those components from other teams, right? So it meant that you could essentially enforce the delivery of certain components, right, that were shared across all teams. Then individual teams could have their own local bits of application software and libraries and the like. But still share the sort of global bit. And the domain was hierarchical, so you could have a global level. You could have the level, domains could be nested within domains, which meant if you had a multinational organization, you could put administrators at different levels. Right? So you could have, a US administrator, a European administrator. You could still share global data, but each individual regions could have their own components. And then within those, the teams could have their components. So it was this idea of a hierarchy where you could share things. And then if somebody developed something locally that they wanted to share with everybody else, for example, they just moved it up the domain tree and then everyone else sees it. Right? So you had this concept that from a deployment manager's perspective, you could look at an individual project team, and everyone within that project team is pretty much self-sufficient. They can develop their own components, they can see their components, and only their components. But if they wanted to bring things in from outside, they could do, right? So if someone creates a global level, they could bring it into their project team. So that was the idea behind the domain model, and it covered not only components but applications, users. You know, a user could go into a certain domain and have access only to that region, for example, or that team, or everywhere, depending on where you were. So that was the concept. As Tracy said, it never really took off because it was designed more or less to be for in-house application development and for on-prem solutions. And it was unfortunate that it was released more or less as everything started to shift to the cloud, right? So we never really got that sort of traction with it. But the concept was still quite valuable. And it was Tracy's insight, I think, into say, well, hang on, this domain model is perfect for microservices that I think has made that shift. Because yeah, the concept was great for what it was, but it fits the microservices platform exceptionally well, right?
Well, you know what your next task is, Phil. You got to write a book about it.
If only I had the time. Yeah. So yeah, I'm keeping half an eye on the other computer. I'm on my other job. Yeah.
And Phil's partner in crime, Robert, just came on. Robert, say hello. Robert was also involved in the backend database piece of it, wasn't he?
Hi guys. Yeah, I wrote the engine.
He wrote the engine.
Yeah.
And
so
then
all that DM scripts and all the all that clever part was all Rob's bit. Yeah.
And then Jamie Wilson, that's looking kind of cool in his really cool chair and his nice sweater. He was the third person.
It's cold.
It's cold. He was the third person who worked on this project initially. So the three of them are here, and I thank you so much for showing up. It warms my heart. And I'm so happy that this day has happened because it is an amazing piece of body of work. And I am glad that you had the insight that occurred back then, because it is very, very it's very appropriate right now for microservices. Now, on that discussion that Phil had about how those domains are structured, one of my dreams is to be able to see, and now that that Ortelius is in the CD Foundation, we do have the ability to create a microservice sharing platform, right? Because we can have open source microservices published to the catalog at those higher level domains with all of their metadata about how to deploy them so they can be shared across the world, basically. So we have the potential to do that. The domain structure, as Phil just described, it has that. Now, since Phil and James and Robert's time, we have obviously SaaSified it. We have added a lot of features around managing containers, but we have kept the core of that domain structure and the versioning. We don't necessarily use the deployment engine. It's there and it can be used for database updates, but we now are integrating with tools like Helm, and we're going to do work on Spinnaker and Argo and some of the other tools that people are used to using for deploying out the infrastructure with the code. And there's Tara Hernandez, who is also she's on our TOC as well. And Tara, thank you so much for your continued support. And I know it's early for you.
Only for you would I haul myself out of bed this early.
Well,
which means I hauled myself out about an hour ago.
I know. Thank you, Tara, so much. I really do appreciate it. But Tara, she's been an inside champion for us.
So it occurs to me that Ortelius may be the first time we've been talking at the CDF about at what point are we going to start actually hosting a production service. There's been all kinds of discussions about what would be appropriate for that, and I think this might be the reason that we actually come up with one. So figuring out how to have operational code for one of the projects is going to be kind of interesting discussion, I think. So I'm looking forward to it, though. So I love the idea of a service marketplace that has vetting.
When Dan first asked me, why do you want this code base to be moved into the CDF, I gave him two answers. I said, first of all, this is a big problem. Microservices are complex, and we have an amazing back-end database that we can start adding, fields and data to track everything that needs to be that we should track, but we need to have the community tell us. It is a community problem to solve. And I said, secondly, we want to be able to build that marketplace, and it should be in an open source community. And those really were the two driving factors of why it should be moved into there. Now, the third one is has more heart, and that is this is a time for people to start learning about microservices and Kubernetes, and what better way than have an open source project that's taking on one of the core problems and solving it. So we have a lot of interesting people on the call, and I'm going to give a shout out to some of the folks who were really with us from early on. Christopher Hicks, he goes by Chicks, but he's, which we always laugh at.
On Discord.
On Discord, yeah, he's Chicks. There's Sasha Wharton, Karam, down in the corner in the cool spaceship, Tatiana, Aisha. These are some of the folks who have really, really stepped up early on. We also have Neetu, Jane, I don't know if she's on, and Parajat. They were the ones to take on roles as community managers right off the bat. And then we have folks like Owen Adams and Marky Jackson, who have come from a really, they know the open source community, and they're helping us stay on track and build a community that is solid. So and then of course this day would not be together here if it wasn't for Tracy Miranda. We call ourselves Tracy Squared, or at least I call ourselves Tracy Squared. So as many of you know, I was on the Eclipse Foundation for about 4 years, and I was the only woman on the Eclipse Foundation. I finally gave in on it. And about 3 years ago, I was at a DevOps World, or I think it was DevOps World, and I got this email from this Tracy Miranda I'd never met, and she invited me to lunch. And I was like, sure, I'll go to lunch. She's from CloudBees. And she sat down and she said, I'm Tracy number 2. And I was like, you are? Okay. And she's like, yeah, you don't know, but I took over from, I started on the Eclipse Foundation after you left. So they called me Tracy number 2. Which I think is pretty funny considering how many women there are that could be on an Eclipse Foundation, and 2 women with the name spelled the same ended up on it. So Tracy is the reason why the CD Foundation exists. She has been the champion of it from the very beginning, and she's now the, I call her, she's now our CEO. Or executive director, as we like to call them at the Linux Foundation, but she is the CEO of the CD Foundation. And that is it. That's all I have to say. Again, thank you to everyone. If I missed your name, I'm so sorry, but I know that we've had some amazing contributors out there early on, and I appreciate it. I'm blown away by the acceptance of this project has had in the open source community, and we hope to make you all proud. And we have a lot of work to do. Let's not think of December as being the end of 2020. Let's think of it as being the beginning of 2021, because it'll make it a happier month for us all.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy number 1. Yeah, I have to give shout out to all your work as well, and efforts in pulling together this amazing community. We're super thrilled to have you all in CDF. And, we always say open source is all about the community, and we're only limited by the capacity of people, and the more folks that come in and get stuck in, the more we can do. So really thrilled to have you all join in, and yeah, welcome.
Thank you. James, you want to say anything? Jamie?
No, I think the only thing I want to say, Tracy, it's just great to see you and Steve. It feels like it's been so long, and I know we've been up to so many different things, I think, since obviously we parted ways, I guess. But it's great to see all of that work that I think, I mean, our companies, for those that don't know, you described we worked in this ecosystem that was, if you like, in the shadow of CA. And I think, well, from our perspective, it was very much CA. I know OpenMate was a bit more diverse, but we had that specialism. And again, we were forced to innovate in, back in the day around that deployment piece, as we saw agility, continuous delivery, and continuous deployments become more and more popular, along with the DevOps and Agile movements. And yeah, just working with the likes of Rob and Phil has been a pleasure, and then bring that together with what we did with OpenMake. I think, as I say, just being back in touch and seeing this take shape and see what you guys have achieved is exceptional.
Thank you.
And just to kind of like a request for everybody, especially anybody that has still doing stuff in the sciences or financial world, we are looking for open source projects that are developing under Kubernetes. So if there's a scientific research project like at a university that you know about, you know, or if there's like some financial open source code out there that's based on microservices and Kubernetes, if you can give them my name, we're looking to bring in those types of open source projects into the domain catalog that Tracy was talking about. So we've reached out to Sandia National Lab and Los Alamos National Lab for some of that code bases, but because they're national labs, it's a big thing. It's hard to navigate those worlds. So if you know of anybody or any projects out there, please pass that along.
Yeah, university projects are the kind of an interesting area. So if any of you are connected to any of the universities in their CI, any of their ML programs or AI programs, that's where it's going to be fun. Steve, I can't hear you.
Looks like there's a football conversation going on in the chat.
Football conversation.
Thank God it's not cricket, though.
You're not a loser.
Sorry, what's wrong with cricket?
That's got to be coming from the beer side of the world.
Yeah.
Hey, Christopher, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thanks, Steve.
And which team are you rooting for over there?
I tend to watch the motorcycles.
Ah.
Yes, but there was an offer to convert to Liverpool, and I would just say that's a no-no.
Sasha, I hope you're not a fan because we cannot be friends anymore if you are.
So Christopher, you like what kind of motorcycle? You like off-road or street or?
I only ride off-road myself because the street bikes tend to hurt a lot, but I tend to watch the MotoGP, follow the MotoGP a little
So
bit.
I have a great story for you. So I was raised in Southern California in this little area called Bloomington, which is really poor, and everybody, the only thing there was to do is to ride mini bikes or motorcycles. And we had this family down the street full of boys, and they rode motorcycles all the time. And I would go over to their house and make them fix my, my bikes, my kickstand or whatever broke. And they were cute, so we didn't mind hanging out in their garage. And the father would come out and show us pictures and say, look what Larry did. Look what Larry did. He won this, he won this. And we were like, yeah. Okay, fast forward, I don't know how many years later, 40 years later, we decided to watch this movie called Dust to Glory about the Baja 1000 race.
Yeah.
And there was Larry Rossler. He's like, he had won the Baja more times than any other person.
Like 14 or 15 times.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, I know that guy. He was my neighbor. All those years, his dad kept showing us all these awesome pictures. I never said, wow, good job, Larry. I just said, hey, can you fix my bike? I was oblivious. My mother hated him because he'd pop wheelies up and down the street all day long.
Tracy, I got to jump, but the congrats. Looking forward to Ortelius being part of the community. So
Tara, thank you. Yes,
thank you, Tara.
We have a TOC meeting to go to.
Yep, got to go.
Well, I'm going to give everybody half of their day back. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Beer and Donuts and for kicking off Ortelius in this amazing open source community.
Great to meet everybody.
Congratulations, everybody. Good to meet you all.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, Tracy.
Bye.
Good seeing you, Paul.
All right, take care.